Greetings YouTube. Here I am again working on some pikemen, which will be a never-ending stream for quite a while. My biggest challenge so far is sometimes finding where to start when it comes to painting. These guys are so plentiful, sometimes you just sit and look and go, oh man, I think I'll play video games instead. Then you remember that you actually like this, and the only reason you do this is because you like it. And then you get back to work. And it's real easy to get burned out on a hobby if you pick a large project like this. Or if you're like me and you have eyes bigger than your palette, and you continually buy new models and trying to figure out what it is you're going to do next. But I think everybody has that in some way or another. At least I tell myself that so I don't feel so bad. So the first week back for my kids at their daycare, which gives me about 4 hours every morning to do things. A lot of it is the honey-do list that never ends, which is to be expected from a stay-at-home dad. The wife works full-time, and she doesn't want to come home and do chores when she gets home, when I could have been doing them instead of sitting on the couch watching Doctor Who. But things are nice. The boys are behaving well. The 2-year-old has decided to give up napping, which I hope is just a very brief phase, and that he goes back to sleeping his normal 1 to 2 hours a day during the afternoon. Because if he doesn't, then there'll be even more things to do to keep boys entertained without making them watch TV all day. But as you can see, I've got my pikemen here on their little popsicle sticks. And again, they're all sticked up on their own, each individual pose. And as such, I can go through each one of them and paint the same areas and remember where it is that I need to paint, what it is I need to paint, and if I forget something on one figure and notice it, I go back and check on all the other 4 figures, and they are all right there for me, real easy to access. This, for mass production painting, this is very useful. I probably wouldn't recommend this if you're doing, say, Space Marines or something that has a whole lot of detail, because like for these guys, there's going to be, I think, 7 colors on each pikeman, with flesh and armor and leather and bronze and then silver and wood, and then each individual unit's color. For these guys it'll be blue. And as such, you know, it's really quick. If you're doing, like I've got an army of Grey Knights, if you're painting those guys, there's all the little seals and all the little finicky details all over the armor. And if you're going to do line highlighting on them, then you've got all that to do. And it can be done mass production wise like this, but in this session I'll get 16 guys with 1 color on them, as opposed to, say, the Grey Knights. I always felt, well, if I did a group of 5 and got 1 color on a group of 5, there's a lot more finicky bits for GW's models for their 40K, that sort of thing. But this would work well, say, for these guys. If you're doing Napoleonics, I think that would work well as well. That would work pretty good, because so many are in similar poses, and you're putting so many onto the field. A good buddy of mine has several hundred Napoleonic figures at the 25mm scale, for which we use to play Black Powder, which is, again, a Warlord Games rule set very similar to Hail Caesar in mechanics. So if you like Napoleonics and you like Hail Caesar, you might want to look into that one. It's also good, say, for American Civil War and American Revolution. But I digress. So again, you see I paint each one. I'm not being terribly careful at this point, mainly because this is the interior color, and so I will be painting over along the edges later with other colors, which will hide any mistakes I have made already. Now, not that I'm going to paint the whole model with tolerant flesh. And then try to go back over and fix it. But, you know, if I get a little bit on what's going to be bronze later, I don't mind. If I get a little bit on what's going to be the linen curious, I don't mind. In fact, the only color I really have to be careful applying is the leather trim work, which there's a lot of that on here. The shoes are all leather. The straps and everything I do. Because if I'm not careful, I have to go back and redo a color or two to patch up at that point. But all the others, I mean, it's just as I build my way out of the interior of the model, I cover up all the mistakes I've done. I cover up the places where I've spilled over one color to where it doesn't belong. And thus it makes it a nice, efficient process with very little backtracking. You see, you can just jump from figure to figure. It also reduces the individual model handling, which, especially for metal models, for me, the more I have to handle them if I don't have them on a little plinth or a little on top of a little paint jar to spin them and turn them, my fingers rub the paint off of the metal very easily. You know, it's not as big of a problem with plastic, but you can also stick your finger in wet paint if you're having to actually touch the model and then spread it onto another part that didn't really need that paint. Especially, I tend to do that usually at the very end when everything else has been very carefully shaded and painted, etc., etc. And then I have to do the absolute most fix-up work. And you see I did that whole little thing in just a few minutes of jabber-jawing, and then I move on to the next group. Because it's about 20-30 minutes before I need to leave to go pick my boys up from school. Getting this last little bit of painting done. Before then, because again, if the 2-year-old doesn't nap, then I definitely cannot paint, and the 4-year-old has become so interested in what Daddy is doing. He wants to help Daddy paint, and he comes and he picks up figures, he comes and he picks up X-Acto knives. It makes it exciting. So, Daddy, can I drink this? No, that's solvent. Can we give it to Samuel? No, can't give it to the little brother. Why does that man not have a shield, Daddy? They'll come on later. Oh. It makes for excitement. Those of you who have kids, and several of you have mentioned that you do, you know exactly what I'm talking about and know why your office is gated off or up the stairs or in the outbuilding to reduce invasions. But again, I think after this stand I'll let you all go. Speaking of models and buying too many, I just recently acquired a Dauntless Dive Bomber, I think I mentioned in my last video, to paint up for my father to remember his father. It turns out I ordered the wrong rendition of the SBD. I ordered the pre-war version, which, one, it's pretty cool that there's a model of the pre-war version. Two, I always tend to do that. I don't read enough as I order my models, and so thus I have an Accurate Miniatures SBD-1 when I needed an SBD-3 to represent what my grandfather did. I could possibly make the 1 work, except that my grandfather was specifically a tail gunner. And the SBD-1 does not have a tail gunner, and instead has a seat for the bomb release fellow. And so I couldn't even fudge that, I don't think. And so I ordered a Italieri Models SBD-3 from Scale Model website online, which is about the same cost as the SBD-1. It just means that I will have more 1/48 scale World War II airplanes to build and to look at. This was the last stand that I primed off of the popsicle sticks and would lay on the ground, not on the ground, but lay on newspaper and prime the one side and then the other. And I've noticed that since I've started putting them on the popsicle sticks first and then priming, I get much less debris on my figures, which is nice because that's a pain in the butt to get rid of. And I usually don't notice it until I have it all wrapped up in my paintbrush. But back to the other subject. This will be a nice long video. But yeah, I ordered some a little plinth to put it on, a nice little replica airbase from the Pacific Theater. So that's where my grandfather flew. It's also where my mother's father was. He was on a destroyer about the same time. Narrowly missed being killed by falling and breaking his arm. He fell, broke his arm while mopping the deck, and was let off on base for his arm to recover, and his ship went to play protection for an invasion fleet. I'm not sure which island, but was struck by 3 kamikaze planes while he was off of it, and a good number of the crew died. The ship itself burnt down to the waterline, the front half of it. They towed the wreck back to dry dock to scrap it, and he has a picture still of that ship to remind him how close he was to death. And there's only a broken arm that saved him. And that's your other random fact for today. Alright, well, I'm going to finish these guys up, and then I'll let you go back to your normal Wednesday work. And again, once these guys are done, only about 60-70 left to go. Anyway, y'all have a good afternoon.